Welcome to the Pete Top, Kevin Bottom podcast. We're not doing an NFL one this week, just sticking to the league stuff. Chris, it's a week since we had our draft. You and me will take us through it, take a look at everything, and also give some updates to the league. But before we do, another draft which happened in that span was the Super League. Drastic changes over the day, like 2 hours before draft time.
Yeah.
Henry and Connor both dropped out. Joe and Sam remained, so we're drafting for the league. Andy P got set up pretty soon in terms of taking over, and then last minute, Chris, you were chucked in the mix. I think you had about an hour to prepare before the draft. It's a strange league, right? It's two of everything. It's the Noah's Ark League, as I like to think of it. 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, 2 flex spots, 1 kicker, 1 defense at least, and then 7 bench players. I mean, it's a deep draft for an 8-person league. How did it overall go?
Yeah, no, it was interesting. Not done a draft like that before. Obviously, so thanks for Tom for sending the invite. Obviously, you for setting it up and obviously stepping in last minute. Looking forward to it as the Super League, as we're calling it, I think. Yeah, so eight players, 8 teams, so a bit more depth on the roster, which is always nice. And there's probably a bit better names on the waiver wire, although the starting rosters are pretty stacked for most people. But yeah, 2 of everything apart from defense and kicker. Obviously the running backs, I think, all went first round. I think the top 8 picks obviously were all running backs, and then there was a high precedence on tight end, but I think Tom managed to snag 3 of the best ones. I think he got Waller, Kittle, and Hawkinson. But he did make a mistake, which he did on our Zoom that we were doing. He said he forgot to set one of there were 2 flexes, so he forgot to set them to the second one to wide receiver, running back, and tight end. So haven't heard any news about that one. So he might have shot himself in the foot, but we'll see. No, it was good. It was good. It was interesting.
Cool. Yeah. Well, we'll at least now we've got a relevant member of the pod who tunes in every week who can keep us updated. So we're not reliant on Connor or Henry showing up to the pod and the league at the same time. So you'll have to keep us updated there, Chris. Nice to see some newcomers to the league make it. Andy P in particular. Nice for him to sub in last minute like that. So hopefully we can bring him back for Pete Top, Kevin Bottom this year.
Yeah, well, that's what we're hoping for. But definitely keep you updated and see how we go.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's go back over our draft. Come back to Pete Top, Kevin Bottom, this league that we're in right now. Overall, the draft, it was an interesting one, wasn't it, Chris? I mean, it's probably in recent memory one of the weirder fantasy drafts that we've been in, where there's a legitimate, top 8 running backs that you could really say are theoretically top 8. And all of them with some weird question marks over them, changing value of tight end, the constant pressure of when do you take a quarterback. But yeah, overall, I think it went about as well as we could do. Definitely some interesting drafting habits out there. We were talking just before. I mean, I think, let's not talk too much about the injuries, but injuries have definitely changed the landscape, as it were. Taking someone like Simon, who had an abysmal draft performance with the selection of Gus Edwards, and now suddenly his team looks at least fieldable. Is there anyone in particular that stands out for you who had the strongest draft?
I think it was a pretty solid draft from most people. I think draft grade will probably differ, but I think it was fairly standard across the board. No one really shone too much. No one really disappointed, maybe apart from 1 or maybe 2. For me, the highest draft grade went to Tom, who drafted first. And purely you're looking at the benefit of being the 101, having the ability to take someone like Christian McCaffrey. He just boosts the team so much. He's such an advantage. So I think apart from that, it was really just a solid draft for most people. But Tom got my highest grade.
Yeah, yeah, I really like Tom's draft too. Tom and Henry were joint for my top grade. So, I think Henry had a nice benefit of drafting behind an auto draft that's based on Flea Flicker's auto draft rankings, which, definitely basically gave him a gimme pick each second half of every round. Let's turn it on its head then. Who do you think had the worst draft?
I think we always come back to the same culprits, I think. So yeah, just looking back through my grades, the lowest one I've got, I feel really bad about this. It is for Andy P, and I'm really sorry to say this, but I mean, I was looking through the team, and I can't give it a bad score, like an F, or I felt I couldn't give it an F, because, look at those 4 rounds. You got Jonathan Taylor, Travis Kelce, who took just in front of me, Pat Mahomes, David Montgomery. I mean, wow, you're looking at fantastic start to a draft. And then it seemed like he just completely forgot about wide receivers, to be fair. So I'm pretty unconvinced that the wide receiver room will do anything. I mean, that might be a bit harsh, but even with superstar wide receiver Adam Thielen, I'm not sure they're going to be doing too much. I mean, I really like Deontay Johnson, Pittsburgh fan, so hopefully I'll have another good season. But apart from that, there's not really much to add a great deal of depth. I think he'll probably still end up with a positive record. He's got like a super stack, and the stack that you want, Mahomes and Kelce, but despite these elite picks, he still managed to get a defense in the 9th and a kicker in the 10th. WTF.
Yeah, that defense wasn't WFT, Washington Football Team.
Nice.
Funnily enough, I actually did not rank Andy P's draft badly at all, to be honest. For me, okay, yeah, easy to see. Top 4 picks. That's exactly how anyone wants to start off a draft.
Yeah.
Wide receiver room, let's just not talk about it. I mean, Adam Thielen and Deontay Johnson. But the worst part is, when did he think, oh, maybe I'll get some wide receiver depth in case one of them doesn't perform at the level that we would expect of a 5th or 6th round pick? And it wasn't until the 12th, 13th, and 14th round that he picked up any wide receivers at all. And it's trading on just awful names as well. I mean, Cole Beasley, Michael Gallup, Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Oh, it just, that's a poor end to a draft. And, it was that mid-round splurge of trying to pick up the next cowboy on his list, Tony Pollard, and then go for quarterback depth. I mean, it helped him last year. Don't get me wrong. Dak went down last year, and thank God he picked up Aaron Rodgers, and that's what earned him the 5th seed in this league and booked him that ticket in the Super League. But yeah, it was a disappointing end to what was an incredible start of a draft.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for me, up until recently, up until that J.K. Dobbins injury, I had 2 joint bottom draft scores. And for me, it was quite a mild draft ranking. I think I had, my highest scores were B+ for Henry and Tom, like I mentioned, and my lowest scores were C-. Simon has since upgraded from a C- to a C, with the Gus Bus now being the back for the Baltimore Ravens. And there was Connor at C-, remaining a C-. Frankly, a hideous draft, if I'm honest. Every single one of his picks in the top 8, 9 rounds all has an injury question over them, with the exception of Devontae Adams. I wouldn't be surprised if Saquon goes out for a long period of time. Wouldn't be surprised if CD has an injury. Julio, when was the last time he went a season without an injury? ETN, he's already out for the season. TJ Hawkinson, okay, maybe he's not injury prone. Who knows? Dak Prescott, could happen again. He's already been injured this preseason. Ronald Jones, James Conner, 2 running backs with injury histories. I mean, let alone how bad that talent looks anyway. The injury concerns don't even merit. There's no upside to counteract with it. I mean, Saquon, of course, huge upside. I'm not denying any of their upside, but when you picked any of those players, you could have just picked a better player who wasn't likely to be injured. That's what it felt like.
Yeah, I mean, so I also gave Connor a C as well. So I feel really bad when I look at Andy's draft and he starts off so well, and I look at Connor's draft and I'm like, oh, Connor. But Devonta Adams, fantastic talent. Saquon, if he plays the whole season, is going to be amazing if he stays fit. CeeDee Lamb, expecting big things. Julio Jones should be good. Apart from that, I'm like, what have you done?
Yeah. I mean, Dak could be an incredible take at quarterback.
Yeah, I'm expecting big things from Dak. I think everybody in fantasy football world is. And I think I kind of had this view for a lot of people when you go into it a little bit further, that a lot of people started really well. And maybe that just because the talent in the top 4 or 5 rounds is really good. And then after that, it's kind of like, well, I wouldn't have picked any of those players. And that's not specifically aimed at Connor or Andy, although I wouldn't have picked any of those players. But I think a lot of the later round depth certainly is not as good as it was. And I'm not sure if that's credit to the league and everyone in it as picking up better players in where they should be, as to why the later rounds are a bit more hit and miss. I'm not quite sure on that, but it wouldn't surprise me if we'd all improved during our time. But yeah, I gave Connor a C, but purely the lack of running back depth is probably the most important one. You left it too late. We discussed this before. Travis Etienne in the 5th. That was his second running back, and now he's gone. All but gone, which is a shame. A lot of people expecting good things from him, but if you look at the other running backs after that, Ronald Jones is in a timeshare. James Conner is in a timeshare. Philip Lindsay is in a timeshare, and also on the Texans. You're basically playing one RB in that format, it looks like. But Devonta Adams, Dak, they're going to be superb picks, I think. He's got the stack, obviously, Dak Prescott and CD. For me, the worst pick was probably Julio Jones in the 4th, but that was nothing against the player. I just think he should have gone RB.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go through and let's take a look at best and worst picks in a second. But I just want to, completely agree with that point about the overall standard of the league. Definitely improved this year. I don't think we really had any, everyone had a couple of weird, oddball selections, but, there was no one in this draft, with the exception of Simon, who you looked at it and you kind of just questioned every single pick. So yeah, definitely the standard was definitely ramping up. Quick fire, because we already talked about him, Chris, but let's go from 1st to 10th pick and go back to Tom for a second. Who in your opinion of his draft was his best pick?
Javonte Williams, 801. I expect him to take over from Melvin Gordon with or without a suspension for the DUI. I also really like Darnell Mooney in the end of the 10th. I think he could be really good. And Johnny Smith was just a free shot at the last pick.
Yeah, and actually Darnell Mooney went in the 12th, so even better value there. But yeah, I loved all 3 of those picks. For me, the best pick which he had was Chris Godwin. I think at the end of the 4th round, being able to go running back, wide receiver like he did, and still snagging Chris Godwin at 410, I mean, that's incredible value. You've essentially got 2 wide receivers now with wide receiver 1 upside. So, that really is what built the strength of his draft. I had his positional groups for running back and wide receiver A+ and A respectively. So yeah, an incredible outing for him there. On the flip side, what about his worst pick?
It's a really tricky one because I do, like I said, I gave him an A on the grade. I really like his depth in all positions. I was a toss up between Brandon Cooks and Latavius Murray, purely because Latavius Murray might not be on the team. And Brandon Cooks was a bit of a cheap one. He seems like the only target really in Houston, but it is the Texans.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? When you pick up a value like that on an awful team. I shied away from saying Kyle Pitts was his worst pick. I think he did what he had to do and picked up, his guy at that spot. And if he didn't pick him up, then he's staring down the barrel, looking at far worse tight ends. So can't criticize that one too much. For me, my concern was DK Metcalf, 3.1. Don't get me wrong. I like DK. Obviously, I'm a Seahawks fan. I think he's got huge upside, but I just think he exists in an offense where I'm scared more about him. There's so many things out of his control which dictate his fantasy value. And at that start of the third round, I would have much rather seen him go in a different direction at wide receiver. I think AJ Brown is a better wide receiver who came from Ole Miss. I think CeeDee Lamb posed some great upside there. But yeah, you're kind of handcuffed in when you got running back as your first 2 picks, and now you're trying to figure out what you're going to do. Yeah, that for me was the one which if I was him on reflection, I would have liked to have taken back.
That's interesting. I probably would have gone DK, to be fair. DK or AJ Brown. I'm not sure CeeDee Lamb is quite high enough at the top of the third, but any 3 of those I would not be disappointed with.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was nitpicking. He had a very good grade from me, Tom. So, by no means was it a bad pick. It was just his worst pick, in my opinion. Let's move on to the second pick. We haven't talked about Joe at all yet, Chris. Obviously he was our third member who was drafting in person with us. Not only was he struggling with the classic Joe concerns of drafting, but he also desperately needed a piss for about half of the draft.
Oh my God, yeah, that was funny.
What did you make of his draft, and who was his best pick in your opinion?
Well, I kind of, if you remember back to when we did it, I kind of was stirring the pot on this one. It started off really well. Similar story as I've said before. Started off really well. Dalvin Cook, Nuke Hopkins, AJ Brown, and DeAndre Swift at the end of the 4th, pretty much the 5th. Yeah, really good. And after that, kind of went off the rails. Still got Aaron Rodgers. He's picked up a Jaguar, James Robinson, who's turned out to be an absolute steal. Again, with an injury there. And Elijah Moore could be on for a good season as a rookie. So, got a B from me. Best picks, DeAndre Swift, I think purely because of the value he's getting, especially as we move towards a half PPR. I think Jared Goff likes to dump it down, check it down. So, at the end of the 4th, as a second running back, I don't think you could have gone wrong there. Bad team in the Lions, but expected to get lots of opportunity, isn't he? Worst pick for me, DJ Chark, end of the 8th. I think there were better values going around. You could have got Javonte Williams, as I alluded to before. Jerry Jeudy. I prefer Laviska Shenault, and maybe that's because I was burnt by DJ Chark last year. But for me, that was the worst one for Joe. Yeah.
Another player who got helped by an injury to make his draft look better. For me, he got a B-. His actual grade didn't change after the Robinson injury. Not Robinson injury, the Travis Etienne injury, but the benefit to Robinson. Overall it was classic what Joe does. Draft solidly first 4 rounds, lose the plot in the later rounds, and make us all look stupid when we criticize him because somehow they pan out like James Robinson. For me the best pick was Aaron Rodgers. Absolutely love that value and that pickup. It was the exact right spot to go quarterback. Got a guy with huge upside. Don't really think his floor's particularly low either, so good value there. Worst pick though for me was Miles Sanders. I really don't think Miles Sanders is the lead running back in Philadelphia for a long time. I know a lot of people are really high on him, but for me, I really don't rate the guy. Even Myles Gaskin was taken 1 pick ahead of him. I think it says it all, really. It was a poor spot to be taken at, but thank goodness he'd already got DeAndre Swift, so he didn't have to worry too much.
Yeah, I think when you're in that end of the 6th, start of the 7th, you're looking at the running backs that go around him. I'm not massively keen on Miles Sanders. Again, been stung by that one. But the next running backs that went, Chase Edmonds, Tony Pollard, Damian Harris, Ronald Jones, Mostert, Javonte. So there, there's a couple of names in there. But really, I think it's much of a muchness at that point, and the ones that go afterwards. So that's why it wasn't Miles Sanders for me.
Yeah, it was tough value. It's everyone knows that middle is awful for running backs. But then how about Sam's draft for you, Chris? Yeah, his draft. How about Sam's draft? For me, it was terrible before J.K. Dobbins went down. He was at C+, but then he went to C. His best pick, honestly, was Cortland Sutton. In my opinion, I absolutely love Cortland Sutton. I think he genuinely has top 20 wide receiver potential. If Jerry Jeudy wasn't there, then we'd be talking completely differently. And let's face it, the Broncos are going to be behind a lot of the time, and they're going to be slugging it a lot of the time, and Cortland Sutton will benefit from that, I'm sure. Worst pick. It's so bad. I wrote this worst pick before the injury, but it was Mike Davis. I do like Mike Davis. I do like what he brings. I think he is a good, talented running back in a position where he's going to get a lot of the opportunities. Considering Dobbins' injury, it looks a lot better than it was. But you could have got a passable tight end here, not being left with that absolute mess which he went for with Dallas Goedert. We'll talk later. Maybe there's a couple dominoes to fall along the line in Philadelphia. But as things are right now, I don't want any shares in that tight end room in Philly.
It's interesting you said Mike Davis was your worst pick, because I've got him as Sam's best pick for me. And this again was written before the Dobbins injury. And actually, I did have Dobbins as the worst pick in inverted commas there, just because I would have gone CEH or Chris Carson there. That's just a preference. But yeah, I felt it was another strong start in the league this year, has led to the quality has just been increasing. So Derrick Henry, Calvin Ridley, then J.K. Dobbins, who I would have gone elsewhere, but Keenan Allen, Mike Davis, yeah, really good generally. Still managed to get Justin Herbert, Cortland Sutton, as you said. The worst pick for me outside of Dobbins was David Johnson, and again, I'm just not touching any of the Texans. Especially not the one that's just going to be maybe a third down pass catcher, even in half point PPR. But their stack for Herbert and Allen, really, 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 really good. I think I gave Sam a B-.
Whoa, drastically better grade there. Let's talk about me, Chris. Yeah, I'll just let you go first. You go first, and then I'll jump in afterwards.
Okay. I wasn't too harsh. I think, like I said, everyone had a fairly similar level of drafting, I think, this year. So B+. Okay, so one of the higher drafts scores. So I've written some panicking displayed from Josh after two separate quarterback runs that Joe and I obviously witnessed in person. But that could pay off if Jalen Hurts fills his people's expectations of what they have for him, especially with the ground game. I know that Sam and his kicker research was glad to see Josh get his kicker pick early with Justin Tucker. But perhaps for me, lacking a bit of receiver depth, but otherwise a good draft from an experienced player. But will he be regretting not taking a quarterback sooner? That's what I've got. But no, generally, I quite like your draft overall. Like I said, one of the probably stronger ones. Good position. Alvin Kamara, Austin Eckler, a great start. Back that up with Darren Waller. Robert Woods is solid. Brandon Ayuk is really good. Kenny Golladay, good talent. Not sure about the team. And then I think you kind of kicked yourself there by not going quarterback. Obviously, like I said, in the middle of two runs. So for me, best pick, Brandon Ayuk. Worst pick, Chase Edmonds, 708. Purely because you could have gone Tannehill, Brady, Dak Prescott.
Yeah, interesting. I graded myself in the middle of the pack as well. B- was where the middle of the pack looked in my grades. Yeah, the story of the draft was literally for me was literally quarterbacks and where they went. Um, I think also drafting just after Henry really hurt me a couple of times. Most notably when Lamar Jackson went. That Kenny Golladay pick would have looked so much better if that was Lamar. My best pick, and this is me willing it into being a good pick, was Matt Stafford at 10.7. I just put a nice little beg in there. Please, Sean McVay, please make this a good pick. Yeah, please, genuinely, please. But the worst pick was Kenny Golladay. That 6.7 spot. I love Kenny Golladay. I love his talent. Obviously, that's why I took him there. But Kenny Golladay could have been Russell Wilson, could have been Aaron Rodgers. And at that spot, I would have been very happy with the team if that was who was my quarterback number one, not Jalen Hurts, whose team just traded a conditional 6th for another backup quarterback. So huge concerns in the quarterback department. I gave myself an F for quarterbacks.
Oh man.
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned, Henry for me was one of the top 2 drafts, and I think he benefited from, obviously he snagged a couple away from me, and he was in a tough spot for his first pick, but after that it felt like he was in pole position within the draft. He got everything he really seemed to ever want. Didn't really have too much taken away from him. Definitely benefited from the fact that Simon was in front of him, snagging some of the players which Simon snagged. But yeah, I just overall loved Henry's draft, to be honest. I thought it was just solid B+. Every single category just seemed to have a great blend of talent. Lamar Jackson in the 6th round, that's easily the best pick of the entire draft, in my opinion. How on earth do you get that? The only reason you get that is because suddenly everyone was panicking about tight end, and the unforgivable pick from you, Chris, of Kareem Hunt 6.3. Could have been Lamar Jackson there, and we could be looking at a much better team for you, in my opinion. Worst pick for Henry was Josh Jacobs, but I still love this value. The fact that Josh Jacobs came rebounding back to him just when he needs a backup running back. But if Josh Jacobs had gone earlier, I do prefer DeAndre Swift, to be honest. But yeah, it's just, a bad... What I deem as his worst pick doesn't necessarily make it, in my opinion, a bad pick. What did you think of Henry's draft?
Yeah, really, really solid as well. I had him at B+ as well, so it was Tom and you two, I think, the highest grades for me. A lot of pot shots for Henry, I thought, but fantastic upside. Really good picks, really good depth, as you've already touched on. Henry's really good with the waiver wires, so it'll be interesting to see how he goes with the new budget system we've got. But yeah, lots of players that should, if all bodes well, have a really good season. So for me, best pick, Curtis Samuel, 1305. Really excited by Washington this year. And I also thought Tua was not a bad shout at all. 15.5. He's got all of the weapons. He's looking good in the preseason. He's another year away from the injury when he started. More experience, hopefully more confidence. So I thought Tua was, it's a shot in the dark. And maybe if there's someone like yourself, Josh, who's looking for a QB that breaks out, could always be traded away with Lamar also on his roster, or vice versa, to be fair. Worst pick also for me was Josh Jacobs. I also prefer Swift at that value.
Yeah, especially now we're in half-point PPR too, but maybe Henry didn't get the memo about that, which at least benefits the rest of us. But yeah, so much late-round potential in there. Most, literally you look across the board, Zach Moss, even Leonard Fournette doesn't look too bad. J.D. McKissick, like you mentioned, the football team have got a decent-looking offense right now. It's not hard to imagine that J.D. McKissick takes a lot of passing reps, really. So, yeah, some high upside. Chris, we're now there. We're now at pick number 6. We're now talking about Simon's draft. I think he was present. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt for the first 6 rounds, and I don't think they went too badly.
I thought they were really good.
Yeah, go on. You take it away. You take it away.
I thought really good start. You know, he's back in the game and he's doing what he always said he's going to do and actually pay attention. But yeah, really good start. I think I would have been envious of his first, 5-6 picks. Chubb, Stephon Diggs, CEH, Allen Robinson, Josh Allen, DJ Moore. And then after that, I'm pretty sure it was an auto draft. For me, it went off a cliff at this point. And ended up with 3 tight ends, an injured kicker. But that being said, the start stops it from being lower than a C. For me, best pick, Josh Allen. I think he's going to have a huge season again. I know you're not too high, but I think having the stack again, Allen and Diggs is going to be real trouble for most people that he faces. Worst pick, just taking a third tight end, to be fair. I actually quite like Robert Tonyan and Logan Thomas. I'm probably less keen on Noah Fant. But yeah, having 3 tight ends is just overkill, man. But yeah, interesting point. I think pretty much everyone, as I was going through, everyone had a stack, apart from Joe. Yeah, just looking through, pretty sure everybody had a stack injury stack. But yeah, a C for Simon.
Yeah, Simon also got a C from me. Ended the draft with as many tight ends as he had running backs, which is always an impressive feat when you only take 3 running backs and you take as many as 3 tight ends. Yeah, impressive stuff from Simon. Agreed. Had an incredible start. Couldn't really ask for much more in his first 6 rounds or so. I think sneakily probably he picked up Noah Fant, and then at that point when he'd felt like he'd satisfied the running back slots, the wide receiver slots, the flex, quarterback and tight end, his night was done and he could do whatever he wanted to do. Little did he know what was happening in the meantime by Flea Flicker. So let's be fair to Simon. I like to grade him as the C, but for Simon's draft, it was probably an A-. For Flea Flicker's draft, it was probably an F. And somehow we've met together in the middle. Best pick was Allen Robinson, in my opinion. Absolutely love that value, 4.5. You've got a genuine wide receiver 1, in my honest opinion. But suddenly now Allen Robinson is not only stuck in purgatory on the Bears, he's also in our fantasy league on Simon's team. So I really want to see some #free Allen Robinson trending in this league too. Someday he'll end up with a spot he likes to eat, but I'm sure Josh Allen being his quarterback would excite Allen Robinson. Exact same spot for the worst pick. Every single tight end taken whenever it was taken was awful value. In particular, Noah Fant for me too, because at least that was the one which Simon took. So yeah. Yeah. Well, now we briefly spoke about Connor anyway. I already told you my opinion of his shoddy drafting. What for you, Chris? Connor's best pick?
Devonta Adams at the 204. No. To be fair, Devonta Adams is a steal at 204, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Or Dak in the 7th, as we've already touched on. I think that's great value.
Yeah, it genuinely was Devontae Adams for me too. It sounds like we're making fun of the rest of his draft, but to get Devontae Adams at 2.4 in a 10-team league, that is incredible. That's probably the best value that any of the top 3 rounds saw. So yeah, closely followed by Travis Kelce, really. What about his worst pick? This feels so bad.
I mentioned it as we mentioned it earlier. It was Julio Jones, and it was nothing on the play. It was just because he should have gone running back for me. You'd had running back Saquon Barkley, Devonta Adams, CeeDee Lamb. You've got your 2 wide receiver spots. You could have got Josh Jacobs. You could have got DeAndre Swift. You could have got Mike Davis if you want. Darrell Henderson. But I really like Julio, but he's going to go in as the 3rd option, 3rd attacking option. in Tennessee behind Derrick Henry and AJ Brown.
Yeah, I mean that spot where he took Julio, I think he was trying to look smart after the draft when he snagged Travis Etienne, and at least then I could kind of understand it. Etienne's injury, these things happen.
Yeah.
Can't blame anyone for that, but I genuinely think that Connor's poor drafting here cost the rest of the league, because now, you got Henry taking Josh Jacobs. You got Joe taking DeAndre Swift after that. And at least one of them wouldn't be looking at one of those running backs had Connor drafted as he really should have done there rather than Julio. I think it was irresponsible drafting, not just poor drafting, irresponsible. But that wasn't even, in my opinion, his worst pick. I absolutely hate James Conner at 9.7. I just think you've let yourself down when you stoop to that level in a backfield with another injury-prone player. Like we talked about, the whole rest of his team, even before his injury, Travis Etienne was a poor pick in my opinion anyway, but that James Conner one just topped it off. Connor, for me, got an F for his bench, which I just thought was atrocious, and a D- for his running backs, which aren't even helped with any potential talent on the bench. So running backs are the lifeblood of fantasy football, and Connor's failed there and in his bench. Maybe he's spending that $100 on the first waiver wire.
Oh my lord! To be fair, I gave Connor a C plus, so he was in the middle of the pack for me.
That's very generous of you, Chris. Well, now we'll see if I return that generosity. Just like, next is you, of course. So
yeah, you can go first.
I'll go first. I will. So you were in the sort of upper half of the league. You got a B from me. So that was the second highest grade which anyone got. Joint first was obviously Henry and Tom. Sorry. But yeah, you got a B. So, obviously had a very good draft on that front. Glaring hole is obviously tight end. I hate Gronkowski. You got screwed over by the auto draft taking Logan Thomas, I think. At least I hope, because if you plan to get Gronk, then you deserve to be shot. Your tight end's got an F. Everything else was very good though. Absolutely loved the fact that you got Aaron Jones at 1.8. I think of everyone who sat there and someone fell to them, Aaron Jones falling at 1.8, incredible. Then you got Tyreek Hill, who, in my opinion, is wide receiver 1, 2.3. Chris Carson, Terry McLaurin. I mean, really, can you start a draft much better than that? Darrell Henderson, no, since because the Rams have traded for Sony Michel, maybe his value dips a bit. Like I said, I hate Kareem Hunt. He was your worst pick, in my opinion. You already had running back depth. Why do you need to reach for Kareem Hunt there when you could have got Lamar Jackson or even a decent tight end, TJ Hawkinson? I know it's a reach still, but I would much rather see either of those players go on your team than Kareem Hunt there. Which compounds the misery, because in my opinion, your best pick was Trey Sermon, 9.8. I think in no time he's going to be an established part of that San Francisco running back rotation. If he doesn't start the season there, he'll be vulturing the touchdowns. When you got that value, you don't need Kareem Hunt. I mean, maybe Kareem Hunt has a great few weeks and you can trade him and get something better, or trade one of the other running backs. But, that was my general take on your draft.
Fair enough. No, I have myself as a B as well. Very pleased with the first 4 picks. I wasn't unhappy with the Darrell Henderson pick, but I said on draft night I wish I'd gone Kyler Murray instead of Darrell Henderson. They were the two that I was tossing up, and then Murray went a couple of picks later to Carl, which I was a bit annoying. I found a bit annoying, but yeah, I wasn't aiming for Gronk, I must admit. I was looking at Logan Thomas, but the auto draft assignment decided he needed a third tight end. So I thought, I've got Brady. I'll match him up with Gronk. If it doesn't pan out, I can just stream that position. In response to TJ Hawkinson, don't really like him. There's no one else at that level that would have gone tight end. Lamar Jackson burned me last year, so I didn't want to take him. And I was burnt by injuries. I made a big hoo-ha about it on pretty much every pod last season. So I don't think you can have enough running backs. So to have Aaron Jones, Chris Carson, Darrell Henderson, Kareem Hunt, Trey Sermon, you know, and AJ Dillon. I don't think I did. I think I did okay. Kareem Hunt, I'm pretty sure, was a top 12 option last season. Obviously, with Nick Chubb having his injuries, but Nick Chubb was also a top 12 running back option as well. So the Browns are going to use both of them. So I was quite happy with that. And fuck Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, who was your worst pick then?
It was Darrell Henderson purely because I could have gone Kyler Murray.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, we talked briefly about Andy P. For me, he got B-, firmly in the middle of that pack. I thought he had a great start to the draft, but you know, like we mentioned about his wide receiver room, which is just atrocious. So let's just go best pick, worst pick for Andy, because we've already dissected a lot of his. Yeah. For me, it was split for his best pick. I absolutely loved Travis Kelce 2.2. Already mentioned about that value. You know, I saw the sigh and the roll of the eyes there, Chris, as you obviously got burned on draft night by that pick, which is always a good sign. If someone gets burned, then you've picked the right guy. And then David Montgomery, 4.2, who I also thought was an incredible value. Probably the best running back that went after the third round. Of course, he went the first of the fourth, but you know, in reality, the person who I would have taken after the third, you know, the last of the real genuine running backs in the league.
Yeah, best pick was Montgomery for me, and at my pick in the third, I went Chris Carson ahead of Montgomery. They both got injury problems, so it was a toss-up really. But yeah, Montgomery best pick for Andy, and worst picks were, as we said, defense and kicker.
Oh yeah, for me the worst picks were Tony Pollard, end of the 7th, and Ryan Tannehill, start of the 8th, because at this spot he probably could have gone for a good wide receiver, you know, with either of those picks. I mean, frankly, considering the fact that he had Adam Thielen and Deontay Johnson, they both should have been wide receivers. You know, wide receivers who went that he could have taken in that range. Juju, Chase Claypool, Jamar Chase, Cortland Sutton, DJ Chark, Brandon Cooks even, Devonta Smith, Jerry Jeudy. I mean, you know, come on. All of these guys were more worthy than snagging a backup running back on a roster that you happen to support, and your second quarterback that's, you know, the 10th quarterback taken in our draft when you'd already taken Patrick Mahomes. I mean, that was just frustrating.
Yeah, definitely. I think it burns a bit brighter for you there, because you could have got Tannehill if you didn't take Tannehill. It's maybe a bit of a personal one, but I think, you know, everyone wants one of their homer picks, and I think Tony Pollard would have been there a bit later, so maybe Andy, if you're listening, maybe you could have picked him up a little bit later and strengthened out the rest of your roster. But otherwise, a good draft apart from going defense and kicker, when you could have got greatest roster depth, as we touched on. But otherwise, yeah, I think the league's looking really good this year.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all for taking value wherever you can take value. If you can get a second quarterback who gives you that starter level caliber and you can trade him for something, it makes perfect sense. But the person who you're looking to trade the quarterback with also has the second weakest wide receiver room, which is me. You know, I also waited a long time to pick up my wide receivers. But yeah, I mean, I probably would have taken Tannehill if he was there. I just think if his wide receiver room looked more solid than Thielen and Deontay Johnson, who, to be honest, I don't even rate where they were taken. Yeah. Well, last pick is Carl. And I actually think that Carl is probably the person in this league who's taken the biggest step up in his draft this year. I genuinely gave him a B as an overall. So, you know, he was at that second highest grade, which I gave to anyone level. You know, he absolutely got slayed. King K. Rool lost him the Smash tournament. He obviously, you know, scripted his entire draft and decided it wasn't a snake draft until it was. And, you know, thank God he obviously was picking at his first slot and the 10th slot, so he could still see some of the talents that he was probably targeting at the other one. But yeah, obviously things didn't start well for Carl, but I think overall he had a very good draft, genuinely. one of the best picks of the entire draft, in my opinion, was Kyler Murray, 5.10. You mentioned it. Obviously, you were considering him at 5.8. I think he still would have been incredible value had you taken him there. So, that says everything. Worst pick, though, I really don't like Mike Evans very much at all. 3.10. I know you've got that opportunity where you take 2 wide receivers in a row. Loved Amari Cooper there. Mike Evans, I just think there's some serious chance of regression. Antonio Brown now has a larger piece of that offense. Godwin's there. Is Tom Brady still Tom Brady?
Gronk is there.
Yeah, well, okay, yeah. Gio Bernard is there. I just didn't like his choice of Mike Evans, and I think that probably went on namesake value rather than actual fantasy value. But yeah, overall, I thought he had a really good draft, actually. Chris, what did you think of Carl's draft?
Yeah, similar thoughts here. I also gave Carl a B, really, really improved as well, which was nice to see. And I think he did really well. I've drafted him from the final spot as well on the turn. And I think that really came down to not drafting any Saints players. I think that's been his weakness in
years past
tonight in all the past drafts. He's just gone out just to get the Saints players, whether they're good values or not. But no, done pretty well, Carl. A good running back core to start off with, and added solid wide receivers. I personally would have gone where you said about Mike Evans. I like the Amari Cooper pick. I think the Cowboys a good year. I probably would have gone Terry McLaurin, obviously, because I took him, or Allen Robinson at the 310 or 4-1 to partner with Cooper. But yeah, generally a really strong roster. Best pick, Kyler Murray. I think personal burn for me. Worst pick, Mark Andrews. I just don't like Mark Andrews. I probably would have gone a different route here. And maybe gone some more depth. I know we've talked about depth before, but no, really solid for Carl. And like I said, it's going to be a tricky one this year.
Yeah, a lot of Ravens hate there. I can feel it, Chris. You hate Lamar, hate Mark Andrews, hate J.K. Dobbins. Yeah, I quite like the Mark Andrews pick. I know, it's not a popular opinion, especially when you look at the fantasy pros out there to like the mid-round tight ends. But I genuinely think Mark Andrews brings a lot to the table. So I did like that pickup from Carl. But we will see. It's a nice, close bunch group. But it certainly feels to me, Chris, like the APC is the weaker division this year. Obviously, the divisions moved around based on who did well as their performance last year. In the APC, this is just going off my rankings. So in the APC, ranked in order is you with your B, then Joe with a B minus, Andy P with a B minus, and then Simon with a C and Connor with a C minus. It just feels like it's the far weaker division. So I'm sure you must be pleased to be in that division, right?
I think if you look from where I was last year in the NKC, I think we all felt that was the stronger division last year. So I'm probably pleased to be out of that. But I think we've mentioned it again. I think the general overall quality of everyone in the league has gone up. So I think it will be tricky, but I still think that the NKC will be the more difficult side of the draw. Tom is in there with his A grade from me, Henry and yourself with the B pluses. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the toughest spot for anyone in the league, to be honest, is Sam, who's gone into the NKC. He got a C grade from me. There's only me that's realistically close in my draft grade in the NKC with a B minus. I know you were a bit higher on my draft, but yeah, then you got Carl B, Tom B plus, Henry B plus. I really think Sam's going to struggle, particularly with the J.K. Dobbins injury now.
Yeah, really, really unfortunate there. And I think if Sam maybe had put some more research into other positions instead of kicker, maybe he could have got some better values in there.
Yeah, it looks like his running back in-depth statistics analysis was lacking when it compares to the kicker group. Maybe you should add an injury rating in there too for next year. um, but let's talk about the league injuries, Chris, and a
Yep.
couple of trades too. So, obviously we'll just talk about ones which have fantasy impact. First thing was Sony Michel got traded to the Rams. Obviously, you've got Darrell Henderson. Are you concerned about how that's going to affect his value at all?
Not massively. Sonny Michel didn't really do it in New England. He's obviously going to be the backup there to Darrell Henderson. I know Darrell Henderson took a thumb injury, but all reports seem it's minor, not really fussed. They're still seeing Henderson as the number one, as predominantly the 1-2 runner. I'm not massively concerned, and especially seeing as Darrell Henderson was, a third, fourth choice running back there, to still get a starter, well, presumed starters, I'm not too fussed.
Yeah, I mean the other person who probably benefits the most, to be honest, from the entire situation is Carl, because he's got Damian Harris as one of his depth running backs, and Sony Michel going basically opens the door for him. Only really Ramondre Stevenson, who's going to challenge for touches, and obviously the ever-present James White, but great value for Carl, I think there. Next one is J.K. Dobbins. Really sad news. He's obviously been injured. He's out for the season, ACL. It's one of the worst things. You experienced it last year with your first pick, Christian McCaffrey. But at least, Sam this year he's got his third pick down already. It's a tough spot for anyone to be in, especially when you're looking down the gun. Mike Davis, Myles Gaskin. Thank God he went running back there, but not a nice spot for anyone to be in. And the obvious winner was the auto draft. Simon picked up Gus Edwards. What a savvy pick. Let's assume he jumped back into flea flicker for that last round selection. If you did, Simon, props to you.
Yeah, fair play.
But what it really feels like to me, Chris, is a couple of seasons ago, when that whole thing happened with Justin Forsett for the Ravens, they were suddenly left with black hole at running back, and they got Alex Collins, who'd been dropped or waived by the Seahawks. Alex Collins has just had an incredible preseason. DJ Dallas had a great preseason too. Rashad Penny feels like the odd man out in the Seahawks running back locker room. And I can see a late draft pick going to Seattle for Rashad Penny. Or he goes through the waiver wires and gets picked up by the Ravens. But I genuinely think that will probably challenge Gus Edwards, whoever ends up going there, because I'm sure they'll make a play for someone.
Yeah, I think they have to. Mark Ingram went in the offseason, losing J.K. Dobbins, who, we joked about me not liking him. I would have taken him in the end of the third. I just would have gone for Chris Carson and CH ahead of him. I would have taken J.K. Dobbins ahead of DeAndre Swift, ahead of Josh Jacobs. So, he's in and around that rounding for a reason. Obviously, a run-heavy offense with Lamar Jackson, who we all expect to be better than last year for all purposes. So, it's really, really difficult. And I think that's one of the downsides of drafting in the preseason or before the season, given you have time for things like this to happen. So maybe that's something that we should consider if it's possible moving forwards again. But yeah, is there a lesson to be learned about draft your handcuff? Certainly I was burned last year. Other people have been burned. So maybe that's something to reflect on.
Yeah, certainly when the handcuff is as talented as the Gus bus. How do you think that impacts Lamar's fantasy value?
Yeah, that was the only other thing I was going to bring up. And surely only makes it higher. So it was pretty much Lamar Jackson sort of trying to run the show. And J.K. Dobbins didn't really have too much of an impact until the end of the season last year. And then you can only defend so many runners. You've only got certain personnel on your team, certain number. You can only match up to certain plays. So I think it just adds more to Lamar Jackson. We all expected him to bounce back. I think this boosts it some more. So really? Maybe that's a very shrewd pick from Henry.
Yeah. For me, it's the chicken and the egg, isn't it? Where J.K. Dobbins' performance is improved, and so did Lamar Jackson's. And which one benefited from which one? Did the overall offense just improve? It's going to be interesting for Lamar. At least it's had some uncertainty, some more upside, but also some more bust potential for me. Then we've got probably the toughest one for any team that drafted anyone, which was Travis Etienne for Connor. We talked about his bold decision with running backs, and it got burned pretty soon with this Travis Etienne injury. How on earth Connor's going to piece together a running back core beyond me. But Joe, undisputed winner of any injury that's happened. James Robinson's value has now gone up to where it probably was to end last year's fantasy, right?
Yeah, definitely value was there until they drafted ETN in the first. So, yeah, really, you don't want to see players get injured in real life, let alone for fantasy. So it is unfortunate. There's not really much more I can say for Connor, at least. But yeah, Joe turns out I think it was a bit of a reluctant pick at the end. I think he wasn't really excited by him. All the excitement is for the rookie, is for ETN, partnering up with Trevor Lawrence. So, it turned out to be a really shrewd pick. And Robinson was a waiver wire darling last year. Everyone was scrapping over him. And he turned out to be an absolute beast. And even on a rubbish team, he absolutely performed and did really, really well. And it's just because we were getting all of the workload. I don't know if there's any other running backs on the roster off the top of my head. I'm sure there must be at least one. But it looks like a massive value there for Joe.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Chris Thompson's still there, but yeah, it's a middling backfield for sure. It's a tough one for Joe though, because his fantasy gain is very much his real life NFL team's loss. We all hate to see that one. The other one, we actually, literally half an hour before we recorded this, it came out. Irv Smith is now injured with a knee injury to his meniscus. So, I took a look at the Vikings depth chart at tight end, and safe to say no one has ever heard of any of those tight ends unless you've supported the Vikings. For me, genuinely, I think Zach Ertz is now in play, and I think the Vikings will pursue him because it's obvious the Eagles don't particularly want him. It's obvious Zach Ertz doesn't particularly want to be in Philadelphia. If they could get a mid-rounder for him, I think they pull the trigger on that trade, and I don't see why the Vikings wouldn't do that too. So keep an eye out for Zach Ertz. I think his value will go up if that happens. And then a final one, Chris. The trade that hurts me. Minshew going to the Eagles. It doesn't hurt. What are the chances that Minshew starts? I think none. Jalen Hurts has already been announced the week one starter. Jaguars wanted to make a statement. They announced Trevor Lawrence is the week one starter. Now get rid of the guy who maybe some people in the locker room are saying, well, he should be the quarterback. He did a good job for us. At least Jalen Hurts already has the locker room behind him. So it's not really much to be lost for the Eagles. We all know they love a backup quarterback. Obviously Nick Foles previously. Only cost a conditional 6th rounder, which is incredible value. I think that's all the Eagles really should have coughed up when they've got Joe Flacco on the roster too. But does this concern fantasy at all, Chris, or is it just a move?
No, I don't think it concerns fantasy. I don't think anyone was really putting Gardner Minshew out there week in, week out. Like you said, Jalen Hurts already announced the starter. I don't think it's a good move, as you said, from Urban Meyer and his coaching team. They're basically gone, Trevor Lawrence is our guy. We've drafted him. Everyone else can get out. So I don't think it's really of fantasy importance. Minshew Mania, the mustache, the jorts, the shades, the hair. I'm sure the Florida people are in very upset. But yeah, I think Jalen Hurts is still going to be the starter there.
Yeah, definitely. Final question, Chris. We'll end the pod in a second, but who out of everyone in this league, which team is it that you're most scared to go up against? And I'll let you answer twice in case you've got a different team that you think will go on to win the league. But I'll start off. For me, I genuinely think Henry is probably primed to repeat again. And I definitely don't want to go up against that roster. If everything clicks and Lamar is playing like we know Lamar can play, Tyler Lockett, Josh Jacobs wins out that backfield undisputed, and George Kittle avoids injury, I really don't want to be playing Henry.
Yeah, really good analysis. I think we all know Henry's hot on it. In terms of fantasy and waivers, we've discussed him already. I'm hoping he doesn't repeat, and I don't want anyone else to do that. For me, I keep coming back to it. Christian McCaffrey just is such a difference maker if he can stay fit as he has done in pretty much every other year. So Tom is definitely one to look out for. Henry is one to look out for, and there's just a part of me that Andy's team, I reckon, will do really well. I know we've sort of torn his second half of the draft apart, but those first 4 picks should be enough to see him through. I reckon Andy's got a very good shout of making the playoffs. I think he would be disappointed if he doesn't.
Yeah. Are we seeing the return of Asai week?
Oh. If he sets his lineups, that would be good.
Yeah, who was it last year? Kendall Hinton for a net minus 2.6 points for the 5 weeks he played in for. Let's not see that again. Let's not see that again. Yeah. Well, we'll keep going. Probably there'll be some more injuries before the start of the preseason. Everyone's got to be hot on the waiver wires because right now obviously there's no budget associated. These players are free roam, so it's first come, first serve. So I think the season kicks off on the 9th of September. Early hours of the 10th for us here in the UK. But so we've still got a weekend or so to go before we get there. But yeah, it should be a good one. Looking forward to it this year.
Yeah, really, really looking forward to it, and hopefully everyone has good luck and has good fun and sets their lineups.
Yeah, that's the main thing. Just set your lineup. That's all that matters. All right. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.